Kent Heithold was murdered in the early morning hours of November 1st, 2001, in the parking lot of the Columbia Daily Tribune. Police struggled to find any leads in this case whatsoever until 2 years later, when 19-year-old Chuck Erickson confessed based on some dreams that he had. He also implicated his friend, Ryan Ferguson, who went on to be convicted of murder based solely on the testimony of Chuck. Welcome to Fact and Suspicion. I'm your host, Dan, here with my co-host, Ben.
Hello.
And if you get mad about false convictions, you might want to grab a drink for this episode.
Yeah.
Because you may already be familiar with the case of Ryan Ferguson, but this is one that will make you furious.
It's been ages since I've actually looked at this case, but I remember it being just infuriating.
Oh, it was complete prosecutorial overreach. Oh my God. Like basically spoon feeding someone a false confession. It was terrible, terrible, terrible. But we'll get into all that in a minute. Let's talk about the people involved in this first. Ryan Ferguson, at the time of the murder, was 17 years old. He was a good kid by most accounts. He was heavily involved in athletics. He may have done some partying and drinking underage, but
who hasn't? That's
nothing out of the norm for high schoolers, right? Now I hate to call Chuck Erickson his friend. They were more like acquaintances. They knew each other from school, but they didn't really hang out a lot.
Not really in the same social circles?
No. And now they were both 17, and Chuck was known to, well, for one, he had a lot of problems with alcohol and drugs. And Chuck was just known to get blackout drunk quite often. He would black out, not remember anything he did, and cause a lot of, trouble for people while he was blacked out. Now,
there's a reliable source.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that he did anything violent. I don't have reports of him doing anything violent, but definitely getting on people's nerves and doing things you shouldn't do when you're drunk. And he didn't remember any of it. And because of that, Chuck didn't have a whole lot of friends. I'm not saying he didn't have friends, but he didn't have a lot of friends, and I don't know if the ones he had were close. And then you had Kent Heithold, who was the man murdered. This happened in 2001. He was an editor at the Columbia Daily Tribune, a sports editor. And he was, well known and liked in the community. So when he was murdered, there was quite a bit of attention toward that. And there's a lot of pressure on the police to find his murderer. And they could not find anything. They couldn't get leads. They had a lot of trouble with it.
Well, it seemed like a pretty random crime, didn't it?
It was. It was really strange.
Those are always the most difficult to solve.
They didn't know, it happened at 2 a.m. outside of his job. They didn't know even a motive, really. Right. So it was a difficult crime. And the thing is, from what I understand, there were security cameras, but they weren't working in the parking lot. So yeah, just a terrible luck on that. But 2 years go by and they can't do anything with this case. They have no clue what happened. And the newspapers start running articles about the case because it's around the 2-year anniversary.
Really critical of the police.
Not necessarily so much critical of police. They may have been. I don't know. But what we're getting to with these articles here is the fact that Chuck Erickson reads some of these articles.
Oh.
And he knew he was blackout drunk that night, had no memory of what happened. And he sees a composite drawing of, who the possible perpetrators. And he thinks he looks kind of like one of them. And it starts to scare him that he didn't know what he did that night. He looks kind of like this person. He's worried maybe I murdered this person. And he starts having dreams about it that bother him a lot. So he talks to some of his friends about it, says, I don't know what happened. I'm worried that I may have been involved in this. And one of those friends calls Crime Stoppers.
I mean, can you blame him?
No, I don't blame him. Especially when you've got someone that can be as erratic as Chuck was. And they call Crime Stoppers. Chuck gets picked up. And the police interrogate him. And he's honest with them. He said, I really don't have any memories of this night, but I'm worried I may have committed these crimes. I just don't know. And the police coerce a confession out of him. It was, albeit a bit easier to coerce this confession than I think a lot of the coerced confessions we've seen.
If I remember correctly, he was very happy to give this confession, wasn't
he? I hate to say he was happy. I think he was scared.
I mean, how did they not identify immediately that this kid was severely mentally ill.
Well, I would not say, okay, I'm not going to necessarily say he was mentally ill. It was just like today, I don't think he has mental illness today. I think this was an effect of how many drugs he was doing at the time. And he was, even when he wasn't high, he was still in this adult state where he just didn't think clearly. Because when you're in that bad of shape with drugs, it takes being off of them for a while to really get your mind back into the correct state. And this man was used to being completely blacked out a few times a week at least. He was not in a proper mental state.
In what world is he a credible witness, though?
No world. Absolutely none.
Well, clearly some jury found it.
Well, we'll get into that when we get into the trial. The prosecutor coached him to the point that he was an amazing witness, actually.
Oh.
But let's get into the police interrogation of him.
I remember a part in the trial where he, doesn't he tell Ryan to just admit it at some point? Stop lying or something like that?
That may have been in the trial. I remember one of his quotes from the trial was, "I did this. We did this," pointing at Ryan. So, yeah, I think he said that to Ryan, but I don't know if it was in the trial.
Okay.
Now, again, let's get back into this interrogation, right? At one point, Ryan actually tells the police, I don't know if I actually did this. I don't have any memories of it. I might just be fabricating all this on the spot. And he thinks he's getting some memories of the night, but
I mean, it's really easy to fabricate memories like that.
It is, especially when you're so nervous and having dreams about them, right? And the cops are asking him questions about specifics of it, as they do, because they have held back details to verify that if someone confesses, this is a real confession.
I mean, it's a good way to weed out people who are giving false confessions.
And the most egregious part of this entire interview is when the police ask him what they strangled Heithold with. Because at first, Chuck says, a T-shirt. I said, no, it wasn't a T-shirt.
Oh.
He said, well, it might have been a bungee cord that Ryan had in the back of his car. No, it wasn't a bungee cord.
Were they playing Pictionary?
Sounds like it, right? Then he said, well, I don't think he would have had a rope in the back of his car. And they're like, wasn't a rope. And he's just like, he's.
And they just let him keep guessing.
He's just getting at the end of his wits. And the cop literally sits back in his chair and he says, I happen to know for a fact that Heithold was strangled with his own belt. Told him what the murder weapon was.
Oh, dear God.
And then he's like, could you see Ryan holding that belt maybe? He's like, well, maybe, yeah. So they just spoon-fed him the entire confession.
Does that man lose his job at some point in this story?
I can't find any reports of him losing his job, but forget losing his job. He should be in jail.
Yeah.
You can't do that. That is, well, firstly, why do you think you withheld that evidence to start with?
It's bad investigative practice. You withhold the evidence so you can verify someone's story. Telling them what happened is, you almost have to be trying to get them to.
And if you guys want to watch some of the clips of the interview, maybe we can put in a couple of the
more egregious ones.
Well, you should know that 5 minutes into this interview, they should have known he knew nothing about this crime. And a little bit of looking into it, they would have realized that when someone actually blacks out being drunk, they don't recover memories from that.
Right.
They never make the memories.
Yeah.
So there's no basis for any kind of fact here. This is all just speculation and the police coming up with their own story. Now, obviously, he's implicating Ryan in this, so Ryan is picked up and arrested as well. And when they're interviewing Ryan, this interview goes completely differently. He is constantly saying, I had nothing to do with this. I wasn't there. I don't think Chuck was there. I don't know anything about this murder.
Did Ryan even remember the particular night in question?
Yeah, because it was Halloween night.
Oh, okay.
And he didn't really hang out with Chuck that often. That's probably the only night he was ever hanging out with Chuck. So it's sort of memorable in that aspect, right?
Okay.
Now, Ryan said, I had nothing to do with this. I wasn't there. And the cops just badger him, and he never gives them anything. Says, I wasn't there. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know why you think I did this. If Chuck says he did it, maybe he did it, but I wasn't there. But again, they don't care. They don't care what Ryan says. He gets arrested for this. And the craziest thing, and this really we talk about the cops and the prosecutors doing terrible things in this particular story. But the judge that set his bail did something horrendous to Ryan.
What was that?
They set his bail at $20 million.
Holy shit.
I don't know about now, but at the time, that was the highest bail ever set for an individual in the United States who had only been accused of one count of murder.
I mean, that is ludicrously high.
Insanely high. Insanely high. And obviously, this guy's not a threat, right? You know, he's a kid. He's at this point, he's 19 years old. Why you think he's such a threat? I don't know if the judge was just being mean to him or if he didn't want him to get out so that he could try to, you know, investigate the matter on his own, figure out what happened.
Clearly, the judge thought he was a danger to the public, or he wouldn't have set it that high.
I don't see how he's a danger to the public. At any rate, because he may have gotten drunk one night and committed a murder, he's a danger to the public. I mean, that is dangerous. Don't get me wrong, but he didn't do it. There's no evidence against him other than the fact that the cops made up a story and gave it to Chuck.
Right.
At any rate, that's where the story starts out. It's pretty bad. Now, that night, what happened is Halloween night, 2001. Ryan met up with Chuck at a party, and you know they were talking a little bit. And he said, "Hey, let's go to a bar and get something to drink." Now, mind you, they're only 17 here, and they go to a bar called By George. And this is in Columbia, Missouri, by the way.
Okay.
And they get in. They're able to get in underage. From what I understand, Ryan's sister was there and was able to get them in. And they spend all their money drinking.
Okay.
And according to Ryan, about 1:15 or so, they leave. He takes Chuck home, and then he goes home. Now, according to Chuck, when they leave, well, this is the story that the police sort of planted in Chuck, right? That they wanted to go do some more drinking.
Okay.
And they didn't have any money. So they decided to go out and rob someone for some money to go drinking.
That seems like a normal thing to do.
And they drive by, and Kent Heithold is out in the parking lot leaving work, and they decide to kill him for his money. Now, the big problem with this is there's absolutely no evidence that Heithold was robbed in any way. They found his wallet and nothing appeared to be missing.
You still had cash in it?
Yeah.
So his story was that they did it for drinking money, and they left the cash in the wallet.
Yeah, I probably never even touched the wallet, honestly. So also,
I mean, he was just like a little puppet that the police could make say anything.
Pretty much, yeah. Now, I don't think they planted that in him. They just were looking for some kind of motive, and he said, "Well, we're looking for drinking money," because they did run out of money that night, right? Now, a couple things with this: one, he wasn't robbed. Two, Kent Heithold was 6'5" and 300 pounds. I don't think you're going to just drive by and pick that guy to mug.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't.
Yeah, that's a big dude.
I don't know. I
probably wouldn't.
I probably wouldn't mug anyone anyway, but I just don't think I'd want to be like, let's go attack this guy and kill him.
Yes,
why would you pick that guy? And beyond that, and this is something that doesn't really come out until later, after the first trial, but by Missouri state law, all the bars have to close at 1:30 a.m.
Okay. And
according to Chuck's story, after they steal the money, they go back to the bar and drink some more.
After it would have already been closed?
Yeah, they would have closed at 1:30, and Heithold wasn't killed until around at least 2:20.
How did they square that circle?
Well, they just didn't bring it up.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. They didn't have to.
Sounds about right.
Apparently. And we'll get into this, but the defense attorney was god-awful in this first case.
Would have to be.
So bad. So bad. Should have never gone to trial. But
I mean, in the family's defense, they probably thought this case would be so easy to win that it didn't really matter who they hired.
Well, they actually paid a lot of money for an attorney.
Oh.
Very prestigious attorney from a prestigious firm in Kansas City.
How do you fuck this one up that bad?
Well, we'll get into it. He fucked it up pretty bad. Now, Kent Heithold had a co-worker that apparently saw him just before he was murdered. A man named Michael Boyd that also worked at the Tribune had left work apparently just a little before Kent, and he was sitting outside in his car, according to him, listening to some music. And he saw Kent walk out, and he said he pulled his car over next to Kent's, and they had a conversation. And he thinks this conversation took place somewhere between 2:12 and 2:20.
So this would have been like immediately before the murder.
Immediately before the murder, right. And
I guess they looked at that guy, right?
Actually, not really that closely.
Look, I'm not in any way saying this guy was involved.
No,
I don't know who this guy is.
And there are some reasons.
I'm just saying that because he was obviously the last person to see him.
There's some reasons. I know he was questioned, but it does not seem he was investigated very strongly. Now, he says that he left and Heithold was still there. Now, the last sighting here, I can't see Kent. He was the last one I saw Kent. But Shauna Ornt, who was a janitor at the Tribune, walked outside and saw two people near Heithold's car. And that's around 2:26. And she said there were two white males, approximately college age.
That couldn't have helped them at trial.
No. And she goes back inside and gets her supervisor named Jerry Trump. And he comes out and they both see these men there. And they say that one of them yelled and said, "Hey, somebody's hurt over here," and they leave and they walk away. So they go over and they find Kent's body. He's dead. Now, I would say that one of the reasons that that Boyd was not looked at very strongly is because he's not two college-age white men. He's one black male.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense.
So, and I'm not saying he had anything to do with it, but I do think they should have investigated him a little more efficiently with this. From what I understand, he wasn't really looked at that strongly.
But that last eyewitness account, that does seem to rule that out.
That is, it does seem to. So I'm not trying to call Michael Boyd into question. I do think maybe the police should have done a little bit more of their due diligence.
Well, that seems to be the case all the way around here.
That's the case a lot of these things we talk about here. So you've got some witnesses, but no real witness to who's seen the murder. No one's seen the murder. They've seen two people around the body.
Okay.
And these two guys, I mean, they are 17, but they think they do sort of fit the description. They're two white males. They could appear to be college age, right?
General.
Yeah. And, you know, they charge them. You know, they take it to trial. Now, Chuck Erickson makes a plea deal because he's testifying against Ryan Ferguson. They only charge Chuck with second-degree murder, and they charge Ryan with first-degree murder, and as well, they charge him for the robbery of Kent Heithold, even though there's no evidence that Kent has been robbed.
In Chuck's recollection, was Ryan the one to actually commit the murder?
Yes, and it was Ryan's idea as well.
Convenient.
Yeah, it usually is. Yeah. Now, as I said,
I mean, to be fair, if you're going to invent a memory, why invent one where you're the murderer?
Obviously, I wouldn't invent one where I'm the bad guy, or not as bad anyway.
Next time I fabricate a crime,
right? Well, they go on to trial, and you know, if you see any of these videos of Chuck Erickson being interviewed, he has no idea about any of this stuff. He's clueless about the crime in the interviews. But when they go to trial, the prosecutor, Kevin Crane, has coached and coached Chuck. This man is a perfect witness. He gives in-depth descriptions of everything.
Things how he couldn't recall earlier.
Things he still can't recall, but he claims to be able to. You know,
how did a good defense attorney not pick this apart? Did they not know about this stuff yet? That he'd been fed this?
He knew. Let's get into what happened with this now.
How do you not make a jury understand that? That yeah, he may sound great now, but he had no clue what happened.
Well, let's talk about that. Their best piece of evidence for that were the tapes of the interrogation of Erickson. And apparently they didn't do a check of their AV equipment beforehand, because when they pull it out there, it's not even as good as those TVs we used to watch videos on in high school.
Oh, dear God.
Like, the jury can't see it. They can't hear it. So it really does no good for them. And this is really
it's convenient.
Exculpatory evidence they've got here, and you know, nothing. And it made me think a lot. This case makes me think a lot about the Michael Peterson, Kathleen Peterson case, because if you watch that documentary about the staircase, Peterson's attorney, David, what was his name? I can't think of his name right now, but his AV guy is in there with him one night, and they're going over a slideshow, and it's not in the right order. Well, the attorney chews him up one side and down the other because everything has to be perfect
in order
when you go into the courtroom. And then this guy doesn't even look into anything. It's just, whatever. Yeah, his name is Charles Rogers, and apparently he's a well-known attorney. They paid a lot of money for him.
Do we know if the quality of this video and audio was generally that way, or did they just get really lucky in this case?
Well, I really don't know, but that seems to be more, on the burden for the defense to make sure they've got something that can play that on, right?
But if it was recorded poorly to begin with,
it wasn't the poor recording, because we can watch it on YouTube.
The defense screwed this up.
Then. Oh yeah, definitely. It's the VCR and the TV there, and they're showing it on, or whatever.
Hold on. Then why did they not ask for a recess and fix it?
Well, I have no idea, but this guy just, Mr. Rogers didn't seem like he was interested in all of that. There's actually one point in the trial, they have a big sky kind of picture of the layout of this area of the city, and he's got different places labeled as places of interest. For instance, the bar they were at, the Tribune, stuff like that. Well, they were all labeled in the wrong place. And the prosecutor has to come up and correct him. That's not where that is. This is over here. This is over here.
So they just looked utterly incompetent to the jury.
Very completely incompetent. It turns out Mr. Rogers didn't even walk the crime scene one time.
Excuse me?
No, never went out to the crime scene to check it out.
The defense attorney never looked at the crime scene.
Never looked at the crime scene.
What the hell did he do?
I don't know. Honestly, he did a bad job. He also apparently did not interview any of the witnesses because, let's get into this. Now, as we said, Jerry Trump, he was the janitor supervisor that Shauna Orntz had to come outside with him. Right?
Okay.
Now, Trump, in his initial interview with police, said he couldn't identify the two people. He didn't get a good enough look at them. However, in trial, he comes up and testifies that he saw their picture in the paper when they were arrested, and it jogged his memory. He realized these are the two guys that he saw there. He testifies to that.
That's convenient.
It is. Another thing we should note about Mr. Jerry Trump is that he is a convicted sex offender. Now, I've been trying to verify exactly what his offense was. I've heard people say he was a child molester. I don't know that for sure. I couldn't find him on the sex.
That's why you talked about sex registries earlier.
Yeah, I couldn't find him on the sex offender registry. I was trying to find him just to verify. I couldn't find him. So I don't know exactly what he did, but that's got to kill some credibility, right?
You would hope so. Did the defense even bring it up, though?
It was brought up, yeah, but it didn't seem to really make any difference. And also, we do have Shauna Ornt called to the stand. Now, she's called by the prosecutor, Kevin Crane. And Crane asks her, did you do this composite sketch? She says, yes, I did that. He's like, did you see the two people that night? And is this the sketch you came up with? Yes. He does not ask, are they in this courtroom, like he asked Jerry Trump. He won't ask her that. He doesn't ask her. So obviously she doesn't think these are the two guys.
Right. He'd have asked if she thought that.
Well, Charles Rogers gets up there and won't ask either.
Wait. The hell?
If he had interviewed her beforehand, he would have known. She would have said, that's not them. But he didn't know what she was going to say, so he was afraid to ask her.
So we know for sure that she didn't think it was them?
Oh, we know because she testified later to that.
And the prosecutor knew that?
Prosecutor knew it.
How did the defense miss that?
Well, obviously the prosecutors, they seem to have withheld that little bit of information that she didn't know that. They withheld a few things in this. There were some Brady violations.
Scumbags.
And, but the defense, all he had to do was interview her.
Right.
The defense attorney. And he just dropped the ball on that, too.
Well, then that's not a Brady violation, then.
Well, maybe not, but if they should have disclosed.
But ineffective assistance of counsel, probably.
No, but if the prosecutors knew that she did not think she did not think they were the perpetrators, they should have disclosed that.
I don't necessarily know that you have to. I think you have to turn over a particular witness, but I don't think you have to tell them what they're saying.
No, but if that's exculpatory evidence.
I'd have to talk to an attorney, though.
From what I've read, a lot of people think that is exculpatory evidence. So that should have been disclosed.
But maybe so.
And if it is exculpatory evidence and it's not disclosed, that is a Brady violation.
Well, yeah, of course. Right. I mean, that's what a Brady violation is.
Now, I said Orange, she didn't think that it was them, but Charlie Rogers, he never asked. So you have to understand the picture that the jury is being painted at this point, though, right? They don't get to see these interviews by the police officers with Charles Erickson because, I mean, they would have known he was just spoon-fed every bit of information if they had.
There's no excuse for that.
Right. And then you have someone who saw them there, got a better look than Jerry Trump, and says, no, this is not them, but they don't hear that either.
The defense's strongest case was the fact that information that this guy claims to have now when he's telling his story in court, he didn't know originally. Like that's their slam dunk.
Yes.
How do you mess that up?
Well, by not, initially
obviously
by not having the video they can watch.
Yeah, but I thought initially you were talking about like the recording didn't come out right.
No, the recording, because we can watch them on YouTube and you can understand it pretty well.
I can't even imagine how was he trying to lose?
I've wondered that myself. It seems like he was less prepared than most public defenders. It seems like, and this man was getting paid quite a bit for this. So,
hope they recoup some of that.
It'd be nice, but I doubt it.
Yeah,
I really doubt it. Another thing that he does that's pretty questionable is he has Ryan take the stand, which you don't do that unless you just have to have a defendant in the murder trial take the stand. I
mean, it depends. Honestly, I've talked to some attorneys who say it's like it depends a lot on the region you're in. In some parts of the country, people just expect the person to speak for themselves. It's why, for example, Kyle Rittenhouse was put on the stand when almost every attorney that I spoke to said that was a mistake, right?
Well,
a Wisconsin jury needed to hear from Kyle.
Maybe that's the case in a Missouri jury as well, but you would think he would have coached him fairly well beforehand.
Yeah, of course.
And Ryan was not coached. Kevin Crane is able to...
Wait, they didn't have hours of prep before?
It doesn't seem so. No, Kevin Crane actually kind of went at him and got a rise out of him a few times, made him look kind of stupid at times. It was rough. It was rough on Ryan. And Crane, the prosecutor, who obviously... I feel like he had to have known Ryan was innocent when he was going at him like this on the stand. But
you can convince yourself of all sorts of things. I hope he's not that damned evil.
No, well, he's either evil or stupid. In either case, you shouldn't be a prosecutor.
No, of course not. Now, maybe prosecutors just shouldn't have the godlike authority we give them.
No, and I've been dealing with that this entire case. They have too much power.
Prosecutorial discretion is absurd.
And you can't. Obviously, they're threatening Chuck with the death penalty here, and they actually tell him, Ryan, he's going to flip on you if you don't do it first. There's lying to him. When Ryan the whole time saying, I had nothing to do with this, nothing, I don't know anything about it. And they told him Ryan was going to flip on him. So obviously Chuck thinks, I've got to do this first, right?
Well, why go to court when you can just terrify them into a plea deal, right?
Right. And he wasn't even sure he'd done this. I think honestly he went in thinking, if I did this, you know what? We'll take care of it. I'll serve my time. But if I didn't, the police can tell me I didn't do it. They'll be able to tell. Sure, there's some evidence, right? And there was evidence. There were fingerprints on Heithold's car, which didn't match either one of them.
Really?
Yeah, there was some hair in Kent Heithold's hand that he ripped out from somebody's head. Didn't match either one of them.
You've got to be kidding me.
No, it completely.
That's a clear sign of a struggle.
One would assume.
He obviously fought his attacker.
Yeah. Well, you would think a big, 6'5", 300-pound guy would fight someone that attacks him with what they say was a tire iron, and then was able to strangle him with his own belt.
Yeah, I'd forgotten how infuriating this case is.
I understand somebody sneaks up on you with a tire iron, they can get the drop on you, but again,
well, clearly he fought at least some if he had hair in his hand.
And they strangled him with the way he died was he was strangled with his own belt. He didn't die from being hit in the head with a tire iron.
That's so weird.
So it's not even. I mean, it's likely it wasn't even a tire iron. Nobody knows what it was, really.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, they never found a murder weapon.
Blunt force trauma was the.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, blunt force trauma, that wasn't the cause of death, though, but they said there was blunt force trauma.
Oh, what was the cause of death?
It was the strangulation.
Oh, right. Yeah. I'm sorry.
And, they never had a murder. Well, they had the belt, but they never had what he was hit with, right? I shouldn't say they didn't have a murder weapon. They had the belt, but they never had the item that he was beaten with. They never found that. And they didn't have a lot of evidence. There wasn't a lot of evidence. And sadly,
Did they say tire iron because that was an item that Ryan possessed?
Yeah, it was something that would have been in the back of the car. And that's something that,
it's interesting how that tends to work, isn't it?
Yeah, it's everybody has a tire iron in the back of their car, so it's really handy how many people have probably murdered with tire irons.
Yeah.
As far as these accusations go. But I don't know. There was never much evidence. And I wish that I had more information about it. But sadly, it's hard to find information about the initial investigation of this because this wasn't a big national media attention case until Ryan Ferguson was accused. And that's when you have this problem because really after the trial, when Ryan's found guilty, he gets sentenced to 40 years. He's 30 for the murder, another 10 for the robbery. That his dad just goes on a crusade.
Yeah, I remember that.
And thank God too, right? Because he'd still be sitting in jail without his dad. His dad gets media attention. He gets his car wrapped with some of that printed plastic saying, set Ryan free, Ryan's innocent. I don't remember exactly what it said, but something like that. Right. He's investigating. He's the one that finds out about the bars being closed.
Wait, they didn't know that at trial?
No, he's the one that found that out.
How the hell did a defense attorney miss that?
I don't know. I have no clue.
That part of the prosecution story was literally impossible.
Literally impossible. Literally impossible. And he found that out. The dad, Bill Ferguson, found that information. He also was.
I remember him giving a million interviews and such.
He, with all of his, media attention, he was able to catch the attention of Kathleen Zellner, who you all may know from Making a Murderer. She represented Stephen Avery.
All right.
And she
can't win them all.
Well, no, she did pro bono work for Ryan on this one, and she's able to get him a habeas corpus trial. Well, habeas corpus hearing, rather.
Okay, right.
Because obviously there were certain things that were unfair about the trial. One of them being that they found out Jerry Trump lied on stage.
So was she just his appeals attorney?
Yes, she was not his attorney until the appeal. Well, really, I don't think technically a habeas corpus hearing is technically an appeal.
I thought I thought it was an appeal.
I don't know if by definition it's the same thing as an appeal. It's pretty much an appeal, but okay. I think an appeal may be something slightly different. It's hard to say, but I know this was
really flexing our legal knowledge here.
We are. I apologize. The habeas corpus hearing has more to do with just the fairness of the trial, whereas an appeal could be based on new evidence or whatnot. And what she got was, for one, Jerry Trump recanted his testimony.
Okay.
They find out that Trump actually lied on stand. His wife did not show him a newspaper with those two pictures in it. His wife actually told an investigator at some point, a prosecutorial investigator at some point, that she had never seen the newspaper. She didn't show him the newspaper. Okay. Trump said he never saw that newspaper until he went into Kevin Crane's office, and that Kevin Crane pressured him into identifying these two boys.
Really?
Right. Well, at the time Trump was going through another trial. I don't know if it was the one for the sexual offenses. But
so they had leverage on him.
Right. And he said that Crane kept saying to him, it'd be really helpful if you can identify these two boys. Now, Shauna Ornt, who, when she was interviewed by Zellner, said that, she never thought that they were the two. And she said that Crane tried to pressure her, got really aggressive with her, into identifying the two of them. And she refused to.
So he's a real piece of shit.
Real piece of shit. Yeah, really bad. And obviously you have the information about the bars being closed. Whatnot. That's more information. But Chuck, who doesn't go by Chuck anymore, he started going by Charles Erickson now, has actually, he contacts Kathleen Zellner and has her come by. And he gives her a statement saying that Ryan had nothing to do with the murders.
Oh, I guess a little time in prison had
Well,
fixed that memory issue he was having.
well, it did, but he actually sort of fell on the sword and made the statement that he did it all alone.
Really?
And yeah, because he said, well, in interviews he said he just felt so bad that he got Ryan into this that he had to do whatever he could to get him out of trouble. And he gave that statement. Now, when they come to the hearing, though, he actually testifies that he didn't have anything to do with it, that he wasn't involved. He has no memories of it and was simply coerced by prosecutors and threatened with a death penalty and made to testify.
But honestly, just that inconsistency helps Ryan a lot.
Oh, obviously it does. And once you have
you got a star witness that can't make his damn mind up.
And once you have these two testimonies recanted, there is zero evidence against Ryan.
Yeah.
There's none whatsoever. So they have to, overturn the convictions and let him go because there's no evidence whatsoever. Now he did, that happened in 2013.
How long had he been in prison at this point?
10 years. No, excuse me. No, that happened in 2014. I'm so sorry. He'd been in prison for 10 years. Jesus. And that's 10 years of his life he lost. Now, he does bring a civil suit against, initially, it is 11 people he brings a civil suit against. That's prosecutors.
I remember him getting a good chunk of change.
Kevin Crane's one of them, 6 police officers, all of them that had done damage to him. Which, rightly so. I think they really did do damage to him.
Yeah, of course.
Now,
you take someone's life away, you deserve to pay. Eventually,
those charges are, they narrow it down to 6 defenders, and it's just the police officers. Sadly, Kevin Crane wasn't included in that.
That's a bitch.
But he is awarded $11 million.
Prosecutors are basically immune to...
Right. He's awarded $1 million for every year he was in prison, and then another $1 million for legal expenses. Which,
good for him. Good for him.
And I would say Kathleen Zellner was well worth it getting him out of jail.
Yeah.
Though, he'll never recover that time. It's not like, yeah, he deserves $10 million for that, but I think he probably deserves more than that.
Probably, but he's out, and now he's got more money than he knows what to do with. So at least some good came from it. Yeah, you can never get the time back, but...
Also, I should mention that Kevin Crane, the prosecutor, the absolute terrible human being that was either so stupid he believes he did it, or just working toward his own ends to get
He's a judge now, isn't he?
He's a circuit court judge.
Yeah. That's usually how that works.
That happens a lot. Yeah, and there is no way this man should be a
you
judge.
Just fuck people your way to the top.
Yeah. Well. In what world can someone who covers up evidence like this be a judge and preside over cases? Obviously, he's going to slant toward the prosecution every time.
Yep. It's a sad state. I think it's like 90. I don't remember the exact statistic, but it was like ridiculously high. Like 90% of all judges are former prosecutors. It may even be higher than that.
I would say mostly because, one, if you're a good defense attorney,
why
would you go be a judge?
You're making plenty of money.
And also, really prosecutors, they're already politicians.
Yeah,
they're already trying to get elected. They know how to work the system. That's part of it. You have to be a politician to be a judge. And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to say all prosecutors are slimy, terrible people. They're not.
They all have too much authority.
They have too much authority.
But not all of them are assholes.
No, but if they could wield the authority correctly, I don't think it would be as big of an issue.
This dude is like fucking out of Phoenix Wright or something, dude. Like, what a clown.
Oh, do you think he'd be a boss?
Probably.
Yeah, it was rough. Something else we should mention here, though, is that Charles Erickson is still in prison for a murder he didn't commit. They let Ryan go, but Charles,
it's still awful.
He's still in there.
Don't get me wrong. It's awful that he's there and he didn't do it. But better him than Ryan.
That's very true. He was the one that confessed to this, and his sentence wasn't as long. But we still have to remember, this guy was coerced. This man, he wasn't in a good state of mind.
Mm-hmm.
He was very vulnerable, and the police really took advantage of that, and they just coerced a confession out of him, and this man shouldn't have gone to jail for that.
This is another case where if the state wanted to, they could just do the right thing and let him go.
No, but
that's not going to happen.
No. I mean, at least Ryan didn't end up having to do an Alford plea.
Right, right.
I can't believe that, honestly. But when there's absolutely no evidence, you can't make an Alford plea, right? Because you have to admit there's some evidence.
I mean, they did it to the West Memphis Three.
That's true.
I mean, what evidence was there against them?
Circumstantial evidence.
I mean, hell,
Maybe.
usually the Alford plea mainly exists in these cases just to prevent them from suing.
Yeah. I hate to even say with the West Memphis Three, it was circumstantial evidence. It was a lot of bias with that. But with this one, there's just nothing whatsoever. And a lot of people have compared the settlement he got as sort of a reverse Alford plea, because they issued him that without really even going to trial. They issued him that, and he took it, and now he can't sue for more.
Right, yeah.
So it's like a reverse Alford plea, which it works the same way.
Right, and you get it quicker. I mean, if you're in his situation, especially as much money as his parents had already spent, I'm sure they were in debt.
Yeah, I know they needed the
$10 million now.
Yeah, and he's in a lot better place now. He was hosting a show on MTV, actually, working to get falsely accused people getting their convictions overturned.
Good for him.
He went on The Amazing Race with a friend of his.
Yeah.
He's had a lot. He's almost like a celebrity now. He seems to really have recovered from that time in prison pretty well. And I'm glad for Ryan Ferguson. Yeah, I'm glad he was able to get past that, because some people after 10 years in prison, they just they're never the same. They're never the same. And maybe the time that Charles Erickson has spent in prison has actually helped him, because he's at least been able to get clean.
That's
true.
And
he's more in it.
We assume.
Well, no, it seems to me, because he's a completely, you watch interviews of him now, he's a completely different person.
Oh, okay. I just didn't. You can't just assume that because they're in prison and don't have access.
No. I didn't mean that. I just mean from what you can see in interviews and stuff, he was much different. I mean, honestly, he's not a stupid person. A lot of people think he's just so dumb because he was coerced into this confession. There's a lot of difference in being mentally handicapped and having so many drug problems that you can't think straight.
Right.
And that's the latter was definitely what was going on with Erickson. He actually, and you could tell when he was a witness in the trial against Ryan, that he was actually pretty sharp. He was a great witness. He was able to describe things very well. He was able to banter with a defense attorney, though. With that defense attorney, I don't know. I mean, a 5-year-old probably could have gone out there and outsmarted him. I don't know.
That's just embarrassing.
It really is. I hate to think of how much money they spent on that guy. I don't know, but by all accounts, he was expensive. So, yeah, they got screwed over on that. He probably should have taken a public defender. I hate to say it. I've never said someone should take a public defender.
Is there any way it could have been worse?
No, I don't think so. I mean,
let's see. Somehow he basically forfeited his best argument, which was that Chuck didn't have this information before the police fed it to him. So the tape and the audio, right?
Mm-hmm.
He didn't figure out that one of the witnesses didn't think that it was his client, and he didn't know that the bars weren't open. That part of their case was literally impossible.
Yeah. He should have figured that stuff out.
I don't know how you could get any worse.
And not just that, like when he has the diagram up there that's labeled the wrong way, and the prosecutor has to go up there and correct it. I mean, you lose the jury loses all faith in this man at that point. What are they going to do? It was just a joke. It was a circus out there, and you can't blame the jury in that point for thinking he was guilty.
No,
I mean,
the defense attorney that incompetent.
No, it was terrible. A lot of times you think, well, the juries are so biased these days, but in this case, I don't think they were. I don't think the defense was able to create any reasonable doubt. Now, the prosecution really didn't prove anything either.
Which is ludicrous considering how much reasonable doubt there is in this case.
So much. Like, reasonable doubt, like, I wouldn't even call it reasonable doubt. I would call it just reasonably knowing that he didn't do this.
It's like the fact that this case ever even went to trial with the evidence they had is ludicrous.
If he had a defense attorney that was decent, I don't think it would have ever gone to trial.
You're probably right, yeah.
Like this guy, he apparently didn't even prep for the case. Maybe he read over the file the night before.
If he had discovered these things that he should have found during his investigation, it probably wouldn't have gone to trial.
I would hope not. But at any rate, it's, as I said, I feel like Kevin Crane had to have known that Ryan was innocent. And
I hope you're wrong, but God, you might be right.
But with the kind of defense that Ryan had, I mean,
well, to the extent that he had one,
it's hard to blame it all on the prosecutor at this point.
Oh God, no! It's just embarrassing.
While it is necessary for prosecutors to have some degree of power in this country, this is a prime example of them wielding it in the wrong ways. How can we solve the problem of getting dangerous criminals off the street without making it so easy to convict the innocent? At some point, the burden of proof left the prosecutors and fell upon the shoulders of the defense. And that is not how our legal system was designed to work. Ryan Ferguson lost 10 years of his life, and while he has been compensated monetarily, he will never recover that time. Charles Erickson is still in jail for a crime he did not commit. And Kent Heithold's murderer is still at large. I may not have all the answers, but I do know that this system has to change. We'd like to thank you for listening to Fact and Suspicion. If you'd enjoyed this episode, we'd love it if you could like and subscribe and maybe tell someone else about the show. If you have any feedback for us, or if you have an episode that you'd like for us to cover, we'd like for you to contact us through email at factandsuspicion@gmail.com or on Twitter @andsuspicion.